Welcome to our home podcast. My name is Lindsay, for those of you who may not know me yet. So I'm the mum in the family here out in Spain. And so far we've had different family members doing this podcast, and we are super excited that this week we have Kat and Amos, who I'm going to introduce you to in a moment, from the US. Part of our vision here, we have a guest flat, and we love to extend hospitality to guests. If you want to know about that, just message us. But Kat and Amos are very dear family from Colorado, and we want to interview certain guests that come and stay with us who have interesting perspectives and stories. And Kat and Amos, actually living in the US, have some interesting perspectives on the current political situation, which we're all very aware of. It's very much in the news. And so we've invited them to share their thoughts with us today. So, Kat and Amos, welcome.
Thanks.
To the podcast. It's really great to have you with us. Kat and Amos, we've known you for many years, and Kat and Amos are very lovely, thinking, balanced, godly people who we really respect. So it's great to have them with us. But we have asked them, and it's quite a vulnerable thing to do, isn't it? But we have asked them, just to be honest, to share their personal views more than anything. So my role isn't to share my opinion, it's to hear from Kat and Amos, who are in America and living there. And it's very easy, I think, in Europe to cast all sorts of judgments on situations, but when you're not actually there, that's quite a different thing, isn't it? Mm. So we are aware that the majority of Christians, and for those listening on Spotify, that is in inverted commas, speech marks, voted for Donald Trump. I'm also aware that you guys were not among that group. Mm-hmm. It would be great if you could share why you were not among that group.
Yeah.
However you want to do that.
I want to start. I feel like it's such an easy topic to just like spiral on, as far as the political environment and Donald Trump as a person, and then the politics of it, and then the two-party system that the U.S. operates in. So that's like a really big question to start with. And
sorry about that.
No, that's
it is a good question.
We knew that question was coming. Even. I don't know. Why don't you start?
Yeah. To clarify, the question is, why didn't we vote?
Why didn't you vote for Donald Trump when the majority of Christians in inverted commas did?
And something we do want to say is that while we are very aligned in our values, that doesn't always necessarily come out the same in our politics. And so
we don't have exactly the same policy preferences as each other or as other people, even people with similar value systems as us. And of course, values are really broad and cover a really vast various aspects of the human condition and the way that societies function. And so, sometimes they'll align for the same people and sometimes they won't. And
for us, that means that while we are often talking about like our values and the way that we chose to vote, that is even nuanced in between the two of us.
Yeah,
for sure.
Not always for exactly the same reasons. You came down on the same side, but yeah.
So for me, it's always challenging to approach an election in the United States with the two-party system. There is the challenge of those two parties having carved up a lot of the primary social, ethical issues that face Americans and said, well, this one is on our platform and that one is on your platform. And they've kind of used that as a strategy to divide up and claim segments of the population.
Because the only thing better than the next best thing to a monopoly is a duopoly.
Which they have.
Which that is the two-party system. It is Pepsi and Coke. It is the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah. And so I'm definitely not in a position where I can say, well, my values don't align with the Republican Party, because there are some issues where I feel that my values do align with the Republican Party. And there's a lot of issues where I feel that my values align with the Democratic Party. And neither party has any sort of comprehensive platform that meets me where my values are. And so it's always picking this election, these people sitting before me, who do I think best reflects me, who do I think best reflects Christ and Christ's vision for the world and humanity, and that's always hard.
Yeah.
To try to divide yourself in that, and so.
And for me, growing up, I was definitely always like, I vote down the Republican side of the ballot. Like, that was just the upbringing. That was essentially the way that I was taught, is that, like, essentially that Democrats are evil or stupid, and it doesn't matter which one. But either way, they're wrong.
Right.
I mean, and like, calling them libtards and things like that was just like a really common part of the culture that I feel like I grew up in. And it was really, and there was a phrase that was taught to me as a kid, which is like, if you're young and conservative, you don't have a heart. And if you're old and liberal, you don't have a brain. And it has been interesting, especially with the now like 3 voting cycles of having Trump as a candidate, how much I feel like my brain and my heart are really in line on one side of this, and it isn't the side that I was always told that it would be.
Right.
Especially like with Christian considerations and my Christian values. That's such a hard phrase, because what does Christian values even mean?
There's a lot of different things that
How
could
you would interpret
Right.
what
How
best represents Christ. Yeah.
for sure.
Which is really interesting.
All that to say, I think that there's a number of pretty important factors to both of us. Some more important, to one of us or the other than others. But there's obviously the character of the people that we are dealing with, which is really challenging, because I think that there is no perfect candidate. There wasn't a perfect candidate on the ballot. You had, candidates on all sides that refused to denounce ongoing genocides. You had candidates that had contributed to really harmful for-profit prison systems in the United States on both sides of the aisle. There's no good candidate, which is part of the challenge. But eventually you have to pick a name and write it down, or check the box next to it, or fill in the bubble, whatever your ballot happens to be. And so big factors is like I said, the values and whether or not I think that person is a good person who can be trusted with that level of power and authority and influence. It is, do I think their policies are good and to at least some degree representative of my values, and to the degree that they can be, being stuck with the two-party system. How much do I trust them to tell me what they're doing and to do what they say they will do, which is always a problem with politicians, especially in the United States. They'll say whatever they need you to get elected, and then they'll vote the way that the money flows in. And it kind of doesn't matter what party you're a part of. That is a true thing in most of those instances. And so those are, I think, really important factors for me. Are there any big factors for you that I was missing in that?
Yeah, I think that a really big factor for me, so I haven't voted for Trump in any of the 3 elections, and I think that was also kind of at a time where I was really evaluating, okay, the things that matter to me as a Christian is feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, taking care of the sick, right? The love of Christ as I see it, that is the action of it. And politically, in the way that I viewed the world, that hadn't been, I had always thought, well, it's the church's job to take care of those people. It's the church's job to take care of those people. And I always thought that it shouldn't be the government's job to do that.
Right.
And I don't believe that anymore. I believe that if I have the ability to vote, and if I have the ability to say, no, I do want my country, that I have the ability to influence with my vote, and that's something that the people of the Bible didn't have, generally speaking, then why wouldn't I use my influence in my country to help advocate for those Christian values of taking care of humans and loving humans, if I can.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been the direction that I've been moving for the past 3 election cycles. And I mean, and if for the most recent one, then it's just that was my view the whole time, or not the whole time, but over the last decade, decade and plus a few.
I definitely.
Yeah, that was a
Sorry,
ramble.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no.
That was a ramble. Go ahead.
And the same thing. I also grew up hearing, like, well, any work, even if it is good, not done in the name of Christ, is a dead work, and it's pointless, and so there's no point in feeding the poor or clothing the naked or healing the sick.
If it's with your tax dollars,
if it's with, because
instead of your tithing dollars.
It doesn't count.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and
Interesting phrase. Not heard that one before.
yeah,
I just made it up.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we.
But it represented a truth you were aware of.
That actually really sums it up well for me. Is that like, why should my tax dollars be different than my tithing dollars when it comes to trying to do right by image bearers of God?
And I don't think that, especially with constitutional concepts such as the separation of church and state, I don't think it is the most appropriate for everyone to try to moralize and make religious the operations of the government, because I certainly don't want other groups who have very different religious ideals than me to weaponize the government against me, and so I don't want to weaponize the government against them. I think that's part of wanting to live in a democratic and egalitarian society. That's the one we're shooting for anyway. And so there are, I do believe that it is worth doing the good that we can do, and but there's also like limits to, I think, how we should weaponize people's influence in the government to inflict their personal belief systems on other people that may not have those, especially if we want to live in a just and fair society. That's kind of,
Yeah, you're using the word weaponize, and I would like, and yours is very much about like forcing your beliefs onto other people, and mine is about how do I extend my help.
Can it be both and? Can the church be and should be helping the poor and the needy? But I think, Kat, you're saying the government should be also, in your view, should be reflecting.
It can, like, if I have the ability to vote that into existence.
Yeah, and I think my point was like, at what point does doing good turn into doing good that other people don't want done to them?
That's fair.
Right.
We all have lots of different ideas about what is good, and those could be imposed on other people in harmful ways.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the old missionary principle, going in and forcing people to change their culture or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a lot to say. So I think that the most salient points for me, why I didn't vote for no, that's the whole thing we've been dancing around this whole time.
we can land the plane on this one.
Yeah, for sure.
In summary, why did you not?
I feel that Trump, in his rhetoric, the way that he mocks and dehumanizes and speaks about people, is it makes some people feel good because he's attacking the people they don't like, but for me, I am not interested in appointing political and social leaders who deny the dignity and respect that should go along with being an image bearer of God.
Amen.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And that's just not something I'm interested in having in office, regardless of any number of other things.
Right.
If we desperately need a conservative for whatever reason is important to someone, we can have a conservative that doesn't dehumanize people, and doesn't deny the dignity and respect that they're due as image bearers of God.
Right.
And what that essentially comes down to is that whatever, like we mentioned kind of at the beginning, like whatever those single issue, or what's the phrase?
Single issue voters, or
like the single issues that people tend to vote because of, whether it is abortion or whether it is Second Amendment and gun control, or whether it is
LGBTQIA,
there's just some really like hot ticket items in the U.S. that are like these single issues that voters really tend to go Democrat or Republican because of, or leftist and Republican, determining on how you define, that like, it was one of those where historically in my life, I had always very much been more on the right side, more on the right of my voting patterns. And it wasn't until I was really challenged with this, like, okay, this is a candidate with Trump in the 2016 election, of like, I cannot morally abide this person. I cannot abide the way that he treats people. It's not even just that he's like not a class act the way that, previous presidents, many have been. it's like, I cannot abide this person representing me, even if some of these single issues would usually have put me on the right. That was a hard break point for me.
Yeah, and to, not to put words in your mouth, but like, you're not saying that those issues are not important. Those things are really important. The questions around abortion circulate around, oppression of women and the sanctity of human life, LGBTQIA plus, and any number of issues that kind of go along those lines have questions around what it means to have like sexual ethic and integrity. And those things are really important to people, and a lot of people go a lot of different ways on those things, and those things are important.
I mean, and we go different ways on some of those considerations.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Trump dehumanizing someone, that was a big one for me. And also, I want to live in a country that functions as a democracy. I mean, the United States is not strictly a democracy, and we have our own kind of special way of doing things, and there's advantages and disadvantages, and some people feel there's more advantages, and some people feel there's more disadvantages to a lot of those things, but ultimately we have a system that's at least, laid out in a document that has worked so far, and so there's an important question for me is does the person that will be going into office, do I think that they will do their best to play by the rules, even if the game that they're trying to play, even if their end goal is not necessarily the same as mine in every instance? Do I think that they will abide by the rules that we have set down, and therefore submit themselves to the checks and the balances and the will of the people as that goes, and also the rights and the dignities of the people? And so someone who would deny and the legitimacy of any election that didn't favor them, someone who has demonstrated in recent times to ignore court orders by the entities that are supposed to provide those checks and balances, who is through executive power violating powers that traditionally lie with, say, Congress as in the powers of the purse and that sort of thing, is, I think, it is an existential threat to the way that our system works. And that's not to say that it's a threat in the way that it is inevitably going to be bad, because there's no way it could be, but it is a giant unknown. If we throw away the system we have, we don't know what's going to replace it. And if we elect people that will not play by the rules of the Constitution and the checks and balances and the wills of the people, and allowing certain powers to rest within the courts and certain powers to rest within the legislature, if we elect someone that denies those things and is looking to subvert those things, that throws a lot of danger and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of difficulty into an already strained nation.
How worried have you been by some of that? Because obviously some people listening will think, oh, what we've heard is exaggerated, or maybe it's been underplayed, depending on which media group you listen to. But how worried have you been or not been by what's gone on in the first 4 months?
Yeah, that's been really interesting, and we were talking a little bit about this before, of just like getting into a little bit of our own musings about like why this is the decision that we landed on. Neither of us voted for Trump. And why do we think that people who are very, very similar to us, have very similar values to us, did still? And one of the things that we heard a lot was, well, that's just like during the election cycle, right? Like prior to him winning the election. There was a lot of this like, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. Like, of course he's being ridiculous. Of course he's hyperbolic and saying crazy things. He wouldn't really do that. And there was a lot of like, well, we just expect that it will be business as usual. That like Trump will go in and his second term will be a lot like his first term was, and that like he's kind of a doofus online and a jerk online, but when it comes to actual policy and what's going on in the government, it'll be business as usual. And it's been really interesting because in the first 4 months of his second term, it hasn't been business as usual. It's felt really concerning and really scary, and it's really hard not to feel like the conspiracy theorist who's being like, see, we told you so, of like a lot of the things that Trump promised or threatened, it felt like a threat to us during the election, is happening.
And it's hard to know because you don't know how far it's going to go until it goes there. And so there's a difference between things that have already been done versus things that have been talked about or things that have been thrown out there, and how much of this or that comment or idea is a distraction from things that are happening.
It feels like so much of it is like Trump or the Trump administration essentially like pushing the boundary and then saying to the rest of the government, what are you going to do about it? Like, oh, we're going to like, do this executive order. What are you going to do about it? Oh, we're going to just say that we don't have to abide by judicial rulings. What are you going to do about it? Like, it feels like the executive branch right now is a bully who's sitting here saying, well, what are you going to do about it? Like, where's the teeth in your branch of the government to stop me from doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And so, we've seen the progress from, this is a party that believes in free speech. Well, sort of free speech. We're going to take this person who wrote about a thing that we don't like about another nation's policies in their school newspaper, and we're going to revoke their visa and deport them. Here's another student who was involved in peaceful protests about an idea that was very important to them, and we are going to arrest them and throw them in a detention center and explore ways that we can revoke their green card and attempt to deport them even though they are
undeportable because they have a green card.
And and they have judicial rulings that say that they shouldn't be.
So the free speech seems to go one way.
The free speech, I mean, like, you're very free to say things, and I mean, like, I don't personally feel a lot of fear in criticizing my government, but it's really easy in that I, am an American citizen. Both my parents are American citizens. I don't have a serious criminal record. I'm very difficult to come after as a human being, in that system. But anyone who is impoverished or an immigrant or a child of an immigrant or
not white passing enough,
there are some questions and some difficulties in that, and so we're seeing deportations and things like that of people who are not.
And let's be clear, some are deportations and some are kidnappings by the government, because if you're a citizen, you can't be deported.
I mean, if it's by the government, is it definitively a kidnapping? But
then what is it?
And you throw a black bag over someone's head and take them somewhere that you're not supposed to take them. It is a question, for sure.
It's not good. Whatever it's called,
whatever it is,
not good.
Whatever it is, I don't want it happening to me, and I don't want it happening to other people,
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
And so we've seen it go that far, and so we haven't seen things happening as much, but we've seen talking about extending that treatment to homegrown criminals, people who are born citizens but are undesirable for one reason or another. And the claim is always that, like, oh, well, these are the worst of the worst, these are terrible criminals, but we're seeing people with parking tickets being deported and rounded up. And so, like, that's hardly, like, the worst of the worst, as I see them. And then we hear, Trump is very realistically talking about his options for a third term, even though it goes against the Constitution and the amendments there, and looking for loopholes, and those loopholes kind of exist, and so maybe he'll exploit them, and maybe he will try for a third term.
And then say, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, we see, and so there's been some pushback, there's been some butting heads between the sections of government, but right now what I see is the executive branch under Trump's leadership really bulldozing a lot of the existing checks and balances, and it's hard to know where that's going to end. It's very uncertain. At what point right now I'm not worried about being black-bagged and taken to a prison on foreign soil for an indeterminate amount of time, never being charged with a crime.
But some people will be.
But some people are.
Yeah.
And they're working towards maybe making that possible for other people.
And are those the main two reasons then that cause you not to vote for him?
I think that those are those are, I think, are the biggest ones. I think that it's hard to make the, like, well, the Democrats always have my vote or the Republicans always have my vote, because that's an issue-to-issue thing. But when it comes to the character of the person and whether or not I think that they can reasonably be trusted to be with that position, whether or not I think that voting for them as a Christian, especially when we look at statistics and say most Christians voted for Trump, what does that say to the world about my feelings of what I think represents Christ. Because right now Christians in America are saying that their Jesus likes Trump, right? Like that's what those statistics tell the world.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's the intended message, it's certainly the message that's coming out from this. And I don't want people to look at Trump and see Jesus, because that's not. It isn't
a fair representation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's actually 3 issues, because Kat, you mentioned very strongly about
That's right.
the love and the policies as well. So it's the
Yeah.
character, it's the constitutional concerns, and the fact that you feel, I mean, you haven't said who you voted for, but yeah, I know that you did not feel who the voting for Trump would have represented the loving gospel that you believe in,
Yeah,
and the character of Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the, I mean, not to belabor it any further, but I'm going to. The last election cycle between Trump and Kamala Harris was really hard because neither party was willing to, and this felt like a really big sticking point, and we don't have to get into it too deep, but like the really big sticking point felt like neither party was willing to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't
drop bombs on refugee camps.
Drop bombs on refugee camps in Gaza.
Yeah.
And that is a part that feels really, really sticky. And like, yeah, we haven't been talking too much about what we think other Christians are voting for. So like that hasn't come up, but that is a really, really big part of the zeitgeist of, I think, maybe the Christian voting mindset is Zionist support of Israel.
Yeah.
That we don't feel that those things are tied. We do not feel that. That's
That is
the end
actually
of that
worth
thought.
commenting on, I think, because there is definitely a strong view out there that the nation of Israel, Netanyahu or whatever, is often seen as that as a political present-day nation should be blessed, supported, honoured, protected in the same way that ancient Israel.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
You got this one.
Yeah.
I think your thoughts represent mine here pretty well.
So for me, I do think that it's important to acknowledge that Christianity is fundamentally a messianic Jewish sect.
Yeah. Sure.
Right? We read Jewish scriptures written by Jewish authors to Jewish, not always in the New Testament, audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not think that Christians should support or tolerate anti-Semitism. Or any number of other bigoted, hateful things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it would be, and I do think that it is important to acknowledge that the biblical narrative sets God's plan as blessing the world and all nations and all peoples through the people of Israel, through Abraham's family.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to deny that, and I don't think that, and I think that Christians should view that as an important part of our own spiritual history, even if it is not necessarily, I'm not Jewish, and so it's not a part of my own ethnic background, but I, as a follower of Christ, to deny Jesus's Jewishness and the inherent Jewishness of those scriptures and that message and that view of the world is a denial of, I think, really important parts of our belief system.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of Jewish people who are not a part of the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel being the political entity that exists in the Middle East right now, and calls itself Israel. That there's a lot of people who are a part of the family of Abraham. They are a part of the Jewish people, and they do carry that spiritual or ethnic or however they might view it, history with them, and that isn't, as well as the promise that goes with that is recorded in those scriptures, that are not a part of the nation of Israel. That political entity led by that leader is not the people of Israel. It is not the Jewish people. And even if it were, there are plenty of biblical examples of that nation going astray and being chastised and being having to be corrected And so being critical of political actions and the ethics around them of a political entity is not the same as being against the Jewish people on a global scale.
Yeah.
And I think that when we conflate those two things, we are doing a massive disservice to our own faith system and our own neighbors in any number of countries that have, I have Jewish friends and neighbors, and to deny them as, children of Israel, as, the Bible would see it, so that I can uphold some political entity that wrote some constitution and claimed that they were something. And sure, yeah, it is a Jewish ethno-state. That is a thing that exists, but that political entity is not the inheritor of the promises of God. The people are.
Yeah. And we can't say it strongly enough, any level of anti-Semitism that is levied against Jewish people in the world because of the actions of Israel is not acceptable. It is not okay. There's, and that's the issue with conflating the two, is that it makes people who aren't part of the nation of Israel responsible for their behavior. So I just wanted to restate that very, very clearly. No level of anti-Semitism because of Israel's behavior is acceptable, or in general.
No, it's a really interesting point, and really important clarification, I think, to make. And some people also, some Christians I know who are very concerned about what they would consider to be inappropriate retaliation to October the 7th, massively, in terms of the numbers of deaths and all the children killed, feel like they can't even say that because they will then be labelled as Hamas supporters or whatever, which is ridiculous, because I'm sure you're also saying, you are in no way pro Hamas terrorist groups that go and do stuff like that. Is absolutely abhorrent, but it's crazy. I mean, I'm not supposed to be sharing my personal opinion here. All I will say is that I am aware of the polarization in so many things, so many topics, that if you vote this way, then you obviously don't care about unborn babies, and if you support, this or go this way, then you're clearly a terrorist supporter. And it's like, come on, that is not what we're talking about.
It's straw man arguments all the way around.
I can believe that we should not be starving and shooting and bombing children and any number of people who are not guilty of terrorist activities. I can believe that, and also not support a terrorist organization that is prominent in the region. I can believe that Israel, the political entity, and the actions of its military and of its government need to be stopped, and they need to answer for their crimes, without saying that I think that the Jewish people as a large ethnic group, or as spiritual inheritors of the promises of God, that they are somehow inherently at fault for all of the things of this political entity, or that they should be targeted in any way. And the idea that people are incapable of holding that sort of nuance is really challenging.
I'm going to stop you there, guys, just because I think there's more that we want to talk about. We decided on reflection on previous podcasts that we're trying to keep them down to 30 minutes because we think it's more likely that people will want to listen to them. And it's good, it'll be a teaser for the next one. So we're going to end this as the end of part 1 on this topic, and then in 2 weeks' time we're going to have Kat and Amos back again. Magically, even though they won't still be in the country, they will still be here. And we're going to have part 2 on this subject. So thanks for listening. Just a reminder that we do have a Facebook community, Our Home Community. If you want to join that, just send us a request, and you can ask questions and relate to us on that platform if you'd like to. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening or watching.
Bye.